Before watching the video, let us summarize the main point that Miss Elin جالمرز highlighted. قبل مشاهدة الفيديو سألخص ما جاء فيه بالنقاط التالية. أولا، خفايا اتصالات زوجتي مع قنصلية كوردستان في لندن بعد فقداني في كوردستان وكذبهم عليها وتلاعبهم بمشاعرها. ثانيا، تفاصيل المداهمة وما جرى فيها واستيلاء البيشمركة على متجر المواد الغذائية العائد لنا، بينما تصرف الأسايش بصورة مهنية ولم يرتضوا لأنفسهم أن يشاطروا ما فعله البيشمركة. ثالثا، تفاصيل اتصال السفارة الإيرلندية بقنصلية كوردستان، ولكنهم لم يجيبوها ولاذوا بالصمت لتغطية جريمتهم. رابعا، استعراض الأدلة التي تثبت تسلط بعض الفاسدين في الأجهزة الأمنية في السليمانية على قنصلية كوردستان واستغلالها لمصالحهم وتغطية جرائمهم، معرضين سمعة كوردستان في الخارج للتشويه وربما المساءلة. خامسا، استعراض الأدلة التي تثبت أنهم أبقوني في السجن رغم أن تحقيقات أمن السليمانية أثبتت براءتي، ولكن للفساد والفاسدين دائما رأي آخر لا علاقة له بالقضاء والتحقيقات. النقطة الأخيرة، تورط مسؤول كبير في السليمانية والذي كان يأمر القاضي ويأمر إدارة السجن بإبقائه ولأمد غير محدود، آملا أن تنسى قضيتي ولا أحد يسأل عني، وتحديدا الجهات الرسمية في بريطانيا وإيرلندا، وعندها يتم تصفيتي. ولكن من هذا المسؤول ولماذا يفعل ذلك؟ هذا ما على الجهات التحقيقية الإجابة عليه. فأنا مجرد شخص عادي غير معروف، لست سياسيا أو عسكريا أو لدي توجهات حزبية ومنقطع عن العراق لفترات طويلة. فلنستمع إلى الأدلة والبراهين التي تستعرضها في حديثها هذا.
My name is Ilين, a British citizen living in London. I'm sending this message to the judiciary in Kurdistan. My partner, my husband Gassim, went to visit his family in Iraq, Kurdistan. He only ever goes to Kurdistan when he visits because he feels safer there compared to the rest of Iraq. Sadly, his mother died last year in Kalar city, but he couldn't visit then because of the COVID rules that were in place at the time, which made it complicated. He told me about the farm that his brother was renting and that he was supporting his brother to invest in a food market. He even showed me around the farm on a video call between us and spoke of his plans to invest in a medical project similar to the medical centre that Gassim was working on here. He even spoke of plans to bring me to be with him in Suleimania for a few weeks. What happened to Gassim was really shocking, unexpected and horrible. But on the 11th of April 22, he suddenly disappeared and I lost contact with him for 4 months and I knew nothing about what had happened to him. The pain I had suffered for 4 months, I knew nothing about what had happened to him, which caused me great distress and left me with stress, anxiety and depression. 2 months after his disappearance, I sought the support of a psychologist who was provided by my employer, having 4 one-hour sessions, and I also had 10 sessions with a health coach. I also received support from my local church, family and friends, and was desperate to know what had happened to him. Knowing I am fragile, Gassim told me he asked again and again for the security authority to send me a single message to reassure me, but they refused. I couldn't even imagine this happening to him. Gassim kept assuring me that Kurdistan is safe. There is no kidnapping of people, he'd said. There is no militia. But suddenly, he stopped chatting to me or replying to my messages. I understood straight away there was something wrong, that something had happened to him. I couldn't even reach his family in Iraq, as the only way to do so was via Gassim's phone when he called them. How could they hide him like that? I didn't know if he was dead, in hospital, or if he just didn't want to talk to me. Every day, different scenarios went round and round in my mind, and I still didn't know anything about what had happened to him. Those responsible individuals who dealt with the case are supposed to reciprocate European support and treat the citizens of Europe with the same respect. They should not arrest them for no crime, as happened with Gassim, or neglect their feelings, as they did with me. When I reported him missing to the London police, I asked them to involve Interpol, as Gassim was missing abroad, and this is also what the Irish Embassy had advised me. A police officer phoned me to tell me that I should contact the Kurdistan consulate, as this was the quickest way to find out what had happened. With this advice, the police clearly trusted the Kurdistan consulate to take my inquiry seriously and to help me. How wrong they were. Far from helping, the Kurdistan consulate ignored my tears and stamped on my broken heart. They played with my emotions by pretending they had no information and would work hard to find out where Gassim was, all the while Gassim was detained there months earlier. I only found out what had happened from Gassim himself after they were forced to release him 4 months later. In fact, what the consulate did in response to my first query on 17 May 22, which I only understood later after I matched what they did with what actually happened to Gassim, is totally unacceptable. Once I contacted the Kurdish consulate and they discovered Gassim was detained there in Suleimania prison, and the security in prison realised I was chasing for news, they realised they may be in trouble because they were still detaining him. So instead of that encouraging them to work positively to free him as soon as possible, they tried to find a reason to hold him, because already his case was closed with no charges. So they sent a letter on 29 May 22 to the Iraqi Directorate General of Intelligence and Security in Baghdad to ask if Gassim was required for any other case, and used this letter as an excuse to hold Gassim until they received a reply from Iraq. Even if what they say is true, that as a routine process of releasing prisoners, they need to be checked in case they are required for another case, it is very odd that these checks should take 3 months, or indeed an indeterminate open period of time. But if this is just a lie or an excuse to hold people in prison for an unknown period to achieve their own purpose, then it is the duty of the Kurdistan government to investigate and find out what is going on in their prison and what the security authorities are doing behind the scenes. Despite the Iraqi Director of Intelligence confirming to the security authority in the prison on 16 June 22 that Gassim wasn't required for any case, and this legally meant they must take his file to court and release Gassim immediately, but they kept him and continued playing their dirty game with me. I emailed on 8 June 22 but received no response. But when they wanted news from me, they emailed me on 14 June 22 to ask if I had reported the case to the London police. Why did the consulate ask me this question? Because the people who detained Gassim wanted to know if there was an investigation regarding Gassim's disappearance in the UK and whether Interpol was going to be involved. And so, they prepared themselves for this scenario, either release Gassim quickly or take a risk and keep him under their control. If you just contacted your government on that day, 14th June, what about the previous 27 days? Did you do nothing? Were you just playing with me here, while tightening the net around Gassim there, while your friendly government was in deep sleep, knowing nothing? Then, on 21st of June 22, that means 70 days after Gassim was detained in your prison, the Kurdistan consulate told me they had informed the government in Kurdistan and that I had to be patient, as if they did not know anything about what had happened to him, while you knew Gassim was there. I'm sorry to say that this is clearly lying, deceit, hypocrisy and disrespect for me, a British citizen. And if you don't respect a British citizen that British police referred to you, that means you don't respect my country, which supports your country, politically, economically and militarily. Is what happened with Gassim a single incident or misfortune? No, sadly not. The misfortune or single incident is that their victim this time was a European national. They are used to their victims being defenceless Iraqi citizens. But when I told them in my reply on 14 June 22 that the London police were not investigating and advised me instead to contact the Kurdistan consulate, they must have heaved a sigh of relief. No one from the UK other than me would be chasing them. This is, of itself, unacceptable behaviour for the consulate, to be used as a data trap and not to offer support and help, and a very dangerous game played by people who represent a government recognised as a friend to Europe. However, they emailed me back on the same day. They would contact their government that day regarding the disappearance of Gassim in Kurdistan, hoping I would go away, while in Kurdistan they could continue with their plan of detaining Gassim seemingly indefinitely. But was he really contacting the government? If so, what did the government do? I heard nothing. For that reason, when I first contacted the Kurdish consulate on 17th May 22 and got a reply the following day, they understood everything. The consulate chose to keep a British woman's mind blind and her heart bleeding, her knowing nothing, to protect this corrupt Kurdish military leader's reputation, leaving my own wound open. Our government defends them, but they defend their corrupted individuals, even at the expense of our pain. There is only one excuse for the consulate, if they say they asked that someone in security authorities hid and didn't tell the truth. If such excuse is accepted, that means there are individuals in the security services, the army, the police in Kurdistan, who do whatever they want, and the government don't know what they do or have any power to control them. That means they act as a militia. They have their own law. They follow the government if that suits them, and ignore it when that suits them. They keep the government in the dark on a lot of matters under cover of sensitivity of these matters and protecting its related information or the people involved. But in fact they cover up their corruption or some of their criminal action. But for Gassim, he fully believes the Kurdistan consulate cannot themselves lie or hide. Their staff do only what their employer, their own boss in Kurdistan, Soleimani, instructs them to say or do. Unfortunately, such false accusation was taken as an excuse by this corrupted senior military officer who detained Gassim and his brother to pillage the store Gassim had invested in. He knew that if Gassim was freed immediately after the court dismissed the case and ordered his release, that means within 2 weeks of his detention, this would impact the reputation of this corrupted officer in 2 ways. 1. All those goods that he stole under the guise of collecting evidence would have had to have been returned to Gassim and his brother. 2. The population and other formal authorities in Kurdistan would discover that the video the officer published in the media, in other words the show they played, to make himself a hero, saying he captured an ISIS cell who threatened Kurdistan's safety, no doubt thinking he may even be rewarded for that, was just a lie, and the public will know that far from being a hero, he's just a lying, corrupted zero. How many innocent people has this genius general, a Peshmerga leader, thrown behind bars where he knows they may be killed? Throwing Gassim with his brother behind bars for a minimum of a few months until their case had been forgotten and then freeing them later, this is something that is easy for them to do. letting the Peshmerga general enjoy his victory in the feast he seized. Then closed the chapter by throwing Qasim and his brother out of Kurdistan when they were released. In fact, they already started that while Qasim and his brother were still in prison, despite them being found innocent and their case closed. The security office warned the wife of his brother, who had been living there for 10 years, to leave Kurdistan within 2 days, otherwise they would force her to leave, despite her being alone with 3 children, the youngest just 2 years old, while her husband was still in their prison. But because the majority of those in government are good and nice, the mayor of her city was unhappy with that and phoned the security office, which agreed to extend her stay for 1 month before she then had to leave. At Suleimaniye prison, they discovered that Qasim is a European national and doctor. Even though the investigation showed nothing against him, they must follow their instructions and keep them for a few months because everything had already been set up. The question is, who instructed them? Is it this Peshmerga general, or is he just part of a corrupted chain working together like the mafia, setting up a deal between themselves or with someone else who wanted Qasim to stay inside the prison? Those in direct contact with Qasim wished for Qasim to be released. One of the security officers even advised Qasim to never return to Iraq. This is a clue that this officer was unhappy with what was going on with Qasim, but had no option but to obey. So they dealt with Qasim with full respect. They provided him with a special room, anything he wanted to make him comfortable. However, after 3 weeks, Qasim asked them to put him with the others to be close to his brother. They agreed and moved him to the hall with around 28 prisoners. Now there was still one question. 3 months were gone. Why did they not release him and finish their game? What was their purpose or secret in insisting on continuing to detain Qasim, despite them being 100% sure he was not related to any kind of terror, and now even had a letter from Iraqi intelligence confirming this? There was not a single legal excuse left for them to hold him in prison, even for a single hour. What they were doing was kidnapping, state terrorism. What was the coincidence that messed up their plan? This misfortune for the Peshmerga general who planned this game, and the others in the hierarchy who covered up his corruption and shared the spoils. Their misfortune, and what they didn't expect, is that one of the brothers is a European national. So they couldn't deal with him as an insect Iraqi citizen, steal his belongings, throw him behind bars, then release him at a time of their own choosing and push him outside the border. But now they knew Qasim had strong wings and could fly to London and meet his wife, his partner, and she would discover that for the past few months the Kurdistan consulate lied to her. They know they will never reach Qasim, so they set a different plan. The brothers should be separated. So, did Qasim know something that put them at risk in the event of his release and return to the UK? Were they scared Qasim may speak out? But it was not reasonable for them to allow Qasim to see or hear anything that might incriminate them in future, particularly when they knew he would be released and leave them to go to a place where they could not silence him. It is expected they were aware of this point, or was there something else stopping them from releasing him? Logic says they should have released him immediately, because if their matter was discovered and investigated officially, they would face charges of the forced disappearance of a European citizen. That is, unless there was a reason they hid this that made them take such risk and decide to illegally detain Qasim and perhaps make him disappear forever. It seems they chose this option. On 5 July 22, they released his brother, but decided the European national should stay. They kept Qasim, but 1 week later, on 14 July 22, I escalated the case to the Irish Department of Foreign Affairs, and on the same day they were surprised the Irish Embassy contacted them asking about Gassam's whereabouts. Now the game became harder for them. They ignored me. I am just an individual, but messing with the embassy is messing with a European country. However, the consulate decided to continue their silence and follow the instructions of corrupted individuals in Suleimani's security. As long as the consulate didn't reply to the embassy or to me, that automatically, logically means they had no news about Gassam, while all the while he was there. This is a deliberate cover-up of a crime. It is a criminal act.
Enforced disappearance is when state forces detain someone and then the authorities provide no information to their family on why they're being held and where they are. It's a serious crime under international law.
Their game continued until they were threatened through a solicitor appointed by his family that they would inform the Irish Embassy that Gassam was being detained there. Then their criminal game would be discovered. They couldn't silence more than 10 members of Gassam's family living outside their border, outside of their control. So their game was now over, and they had no option but to release Gassam. Gassam asked them to return his laptop and mobile phones that he needed for work. The officer told him they didn't have them there. He could collect them from a specific security office located in Kalar City. He even told Gassam that if they said they didn't have them there, Gassam should tell them to call, and he would guide them to his belongings. Despite Gassam confirming that his phones were taken from him in Suleimani, the officer insisted on Gassam following what he had said to him if he wanted them back. However, before releasing him, they phoned his brother to collect him and took a video of Gassam leaving the prison with his brother. Even when they released Gassam, they refused to give him any documentation or letter indicating he was there. The next day, Gassam went there hoping he may get his belongings back, but he followed half of what he was told to do. He went with someone who had authority and asked him to go there alone and not to ask them to call Suleimani. The result? Nothing was there. But the security person expressed surprise that Gassam was taken to Suleimani, not to Kalar, especially as the case wasn't hard, just food products. It was clear to Gassam if he went by himself and that security person had called Suleimani, they would have ordered Gassam's capture, and Gassam would have disappeared forever. The evidence of this is that when Gassam contacted the Irish Embassy in Jordan on 23 August 22 to ask them to help him to restore his belongings, the embassy phoned them demanding they return Gassam's belongings. The same office where Gassam was detained phoned the solicitor to ask him to come and collect Gassam's belongings. So why did they deny they had Gassam's belongings when Gassam asked them? Then asked the solicitor to come and collect them from the same office after the Irish Embassy intervened. Surprisingly, the same solicitor who collected Gassam's belongings from the Suleimani security office wrote to them just 2 weeks earlier on 7/8/22 via Suleimani court, as you can see in this document. However, they denied they had them. Even the judge phoned them, but they insisted they didn't have them. But as soon as the Irish Embassy contacted them, they handed them over. Days after Gassam was released, specifically on the 11th of August 22, his brother received several unknown missed calls. That number he gave to Suleimani's security. I also received missed calls on 22 August 22 to my number, which I had given to the Kurdistan consulate, and that had never happened to me before. But when I hand my personal details to a formal authority, it should be dealt with confidentially, not handed over to the corrupted security to try to mess with me. With such disrespect of the consulate dealing with my case and breaching my private information, making me feel unsafe, not knowing what to expect in the near future. Was someone going to jump over the wall to my house in London? As I'd also given my address to the consulate. The role of an embassy or consulate is to be a local link between two countries to serve the public and represent their government. It is not limited to achieving governmental interests or perhaps the agendas of influential people either inside or outside their government. Hence, I ask the judicial authorities and the executive authorities in Kurdistan to follow up this matter and prosecute those involved so that the consulate's approach in dealing with worried citizens is honesty, truth and transparency. Moreover, the security authorities of Kurdistan had to notify the Irish Embassy or the British Consulate in Erbil regarding Qassem's detention, especially when the charge against him of supporting ISIS is a matter of international attention and not a matter for Kurdistan alone. To check his record there by security agencies of both countries, but they did the opposite and worked hard to hide him and ensure no one knows about him in the UK or Ireland. This is strong evidence that indicates there is no legal basis for Qassem's detention. Hiding him like that, this is kidnapping, this is state terrorism, and the Kurdistan consulate was part of this contemptible action. The Kurdistan consulate in London represents the Kurdistan government in the UK. This means the Kurdistan government deliberately hid the fact he was detained in their prison. This is the enforced disappearance of a European citizen, and the Kurdistan consulate was part of this and bear responsibility of this action, which amounts to terrorism. State terrorism. Qassem attended the court only once, on 26 April 22, and was never called for further investigation or required to attend the court again. I have a simple question I would really like to ask the Kurdish government. If you do not respect Qassem as a naturalised European citizen, do not respect me as a British citizen. Don't respect and deliberately ignore a member of the British Parliament when he contacted you, and don't respect the embassy of a European country, while at the same time seeking European help and support. What does that mean morally, diplomatically, and politically? That raises a question about what is going on and how seriously Kurdistan is taking being part of the international community while it is receiving support from the international community. Clearly the case that the consulate and, unfortunately in other words, the government in general, are under the control of some individuals in security and the army who clearly don't respect the law, just their own law. I do understand they do not represent the Kurdistan people or the actual government. Unfortunately, what they do is weaken the government from inside and make it under their control. I just want to highlight that whenever I mention the Kurdistan government, I mean the Suleimani part I experienced, not the other part. Unfortunately, what happened inside Kurdistan is a conspiracy of silence. The person who detained him claimed his arrest was based on information that came from the Iraqi side, not Kurdistan.
هوالي كان فيها ده هوال جريس باي عراق واكا جموجولو شوني حشارجاي داعش لا أو نهاية لو باخاني دور بريك بلوجوها.
How could that be true when Qassem left Iraq 16 years ago and has never been in Iraq since, unless someone specifically targeted him there? Whether the information came from the Iraqi side or not, this matter is very important and should be investigated. It may not be true at all, just a lie to throw the case on the Iraqi side if the investigation showed this information wasn't true. But also it may be true that it did come from the Iraqi side as random information and was misused and applied to Qassem. However, if the information from Iraq specifically named Qassem, when we know Qassem hasn't been in Iraq itself since 2007, then how was Qassem's name raised? This needs to be thoroughly investigated with the Iraqi side. Moreover, the way the army invaded the farm puts question marks about the person who led the invasion. His professionality and actual identity. Is he army following Kurdistan law or militia with his own law? Should we accept them breaking door locks to confiscate the contents of the store and leaving the doors broken when this is exactly what thieves do? Demolishing the wall of the farm to quickly load contents of the store and running away. This indicates how they behaved like thieves, scared of the police. Unfortunately, this description is totally true, where, for the first time, they acknowledged the police as Saish to join them. Then the police recorded in a list everything that was taken. But that did not suit the army leader, General Ahmad. Therefore, he stopped the loading at this point and came back again alone, demolishing part of the wall and quickly loading their car with everything of worth at the farm, even the fridge, water pump and farm tools. Is there a judicial order that allowed him to do so and act in this way? Or is he a militia who thinks he is above the law and has his own law? He seemingly didn't have time to obtain court permission, but did have time to inform the media and TV channels to join him. Surely such a person doesn't care for court or respect the law, but cares about being a hero in the media and advance his own position at the expense of innocent people who he takes to prison and steals their belongings. Qasim and his brother informed the police when they rented the farm, who checked their identity and took their security permission. The police also inspected the farm several times with nothing found to be wrong. This information unfortunately may indicate the army are not cooperating with the police, who would naturally know more about the local area than they do. Then, when the army accused Qasim of terrorism, why did the army general in Peshmerga take everything that he confiscated with him to the army, as if it was booty and a military gain, not the property of a citizen? This isn't a frontline battlefield. The army does not have the right to confiscate belongings without a court order. The general was supposed to hand over the confiscated goods to the Asaish and leave the whole case to them, because it is their responsibility to complete the investigation, keep the evidence and everything related to the case with them, and communicate with the court. It isn't the job of the army. This is clear evidence that their target or goal was the contents of the store and farm, while using the accusation of terrorism as just a cover for this flagrant theft. In comparison to the army, when Asaish, the police, searched Qasim's brother's house on the evening of the same day, they knocked the door and informed them they had a duty to search the house in the presence of the city mayor. They allowed the family to stay there while they were searching the house to ensure nothing was taken from the house without their knowledge. And then the police recorded a list of any confiscated material. They then returned everything back to the family after the court ordered his release without waiting for Qasim or his brother to ask them. Compare this to the army, who behaved totally differently, as if they were in a different country. Why did the army act like a militia with its own laws and behave like a thief, while the police Asaish behaved in a professional way from the beginning of the issue until the court closed the case? Then, when they knew there was a case against them to return what they illegally confiscated, with no chance for them to silence Qasim as he was safely back in the UK, especially after the Irish embassy contacted the Soleimani government to ensure Qasim's safety, they sent a general in the Peshmerga army, General Sherzad, to return what they seized, and he met Qasim's solicitor, and Qasim understood that nearly 75% of the goods had gone, and what remained may be ruined, and the general refused to give a list of products that he was going to give back, simply because more than 3/4 of the goods were gone, disappeared, or actually stolen by Ali Baba and his gang. Then they tried to hand over the goods to the police Asaish in Kalajo and then Kalar to shift the theft onto them, but both refused to take it because they understood the game that those Peshmerga individuals were trying to play, because they knew it was taken illegally and a lot may have been stolen by the Peshmerga general who confiscated it. They didn't want to bear the responsibility. He even threatened to bring Qassem's brother by force if he didn't come voluntarily. Unfortunately, such military individuals represent a different face of terrorism and work hand in hand with ISIS, because without ISIS they can't steal. Without accusing the others of supporting ISIS, they cannot put them in prison or destroy their cities in order to displace them and steal their belongings. Jalala city is just an example. ISIS entered the city or may have been invited to the city or given a green light. Then all militia and army opened fire, which forced the people to flee. Then ISIS left as well, and militia from all backgrounds stole from the houses, demolishing them by stealing windows, doors, everything they could. These houses weren't demolished by ISIS explosives or due to army fires. There's no sign of explosive materials. Clearly they were destroyed by militia machinery tools. Even the Iraqi parliament recognised this crime and considered that these areas, which were removed from existence, are disaster zones. Before this they had homes, children's schools, health centres, etc. Predictably, the responsible criminal is named as ISIS, while the actual criminal are militia from various directions and ethnicities who work together in order to share the feast and fulfill their own ends, while the victims are the Iraqi citizens. Unfortunately, these militia are either part of the army or receive support from the army. This makes me, as a European citizen, ask whether my country supports the Iraqi army to fight ISIS or to attack Iraqi citizens. Clearly, from the evidence above, this is the work of a militia, not an army protecting citizens' belongings. Such behaviour negatively impacts the Kurdistan Army's reputation, not only outside the country, but also making the people hate their own army and security authorities. If Qassem and his brother are originally Arabic and they don't care for them, the owner of the farm is Kurdish, received the same treatment from such bad people who only respect their own pocket and their paranoid personality. However, what happened to Qassem makes him love Kurdistan more, and more insistent on bringing those minority of thieves and criminals to justice, because he saw how the majority of them were kind and dealt with him in a very respectful way. In fact, with all prisoners, the way the army invaded the farm, confiscated the contents of the farm without returning them after Qassem was released without charge, them unjustifiably detaining Qassem for so long, and the seeming collusion in all of this of the Kurdistan consulate, who hid the fact Qassem was being detained there. All of these indicate a sequence of events to cover up corruption, when each of these events should have been tackled professionally within the law. This is my message to the honourable people in the Kurdistan government. Clean the government of these corrupt people by investigating what I report. You should take the first step, no matter what position these corrupted individuals are in. Kurdistan's reputation must be put above that of any individual. You need to take the first step